Hello and welcome to Searching for the Question Live. My name is David Orban and I am very glad to have all of you connected to the show. We are streaming simultaneously on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and you can comment on each of those platforms, and your questions and remarks I will be able to take and answer if they are appropriate and relevant, as I'm sure they mostly will be. I also invite you to join my Patreon on patreon.com/David Orban in order to support the show, as well as to follow our future episodes by subscribing to the YouTube channel or liking the Searching for the Question page on Facebook. Today's episode is, for me, very exciting because it has to do with one of the most exciting fields there is today, that of artificial intelligence, in particular, the aim to understand, design, implement artificial general intelligence. And today's guest has been a friend for very long, maybe 15 years, maybe more, who is counting. But Ben Goertzel and I have collaborated on many projects. We did, for example, the AGI conference together for a few editions. I helped, and it was Ben's show, as well as of all the wonderful speakers talking about the topics around this theme. And of course, Ben is also the founder of SingularityNET, the platform for AI applications taking advantage of novel approaches of decentralized distributed computing. And I am very much looking forward to be having this conversation with Ben. So without further ado, thank you and welcome, Ben Goertzel.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, David. And yeah, we've been through a lot of different journeys together in the transhumanism, various sorts of internet technology, and now AI, and most recently blockchain. And of course, these are all part of the same web of ideas and dynamics. So
I think, and if I'm not mistaken, we are also born the same year and month. I think you are a week older or something like that, or me. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
December 1966. Yeah.
Oh no, then it is a year. There you go.
Oh yeah.
I'm older, and as the senior one. I can tell you that getting old sucks and dying even more. So please, can you hurry up so that AIs can design the next generation technologies that allow us to upload our minds and, pretend that we don't die because our uploaded mind lives. Otherwise, we end up being those that share the common fate of all futurists. They are all dead, and to be able to falsify that trend would be pretty cool.
Well, yeah, we can if we exhaust nearer future topics, we can dig into reincarnation and resurrection machines, David. I mean, we may be able to reconstitute some of those who have died from the records they've left behind. On the other hand, it'll be even more aesthetically satisfying to keep going without that sort of profound discontinuity.
And yes, let's start from the present and then go into far futures of billions of years and metaverses and megaverses and multiverses. One of the things that I love to do is to fly on these wonderful AR systems, Google Earth very prosaically, from where I am in Bergamo, Italy, to where you are in Vashon Island near Seattle, on the other part of the world. Until recently, you were in Hong Kong. Then you decided that maybe with either COVID encroaching or mainland China deciding that the agreement they had with the Brits shouldn't apply anymore, whatever it was, but you decided to move, right?
Yeah, I lived in Hong Kong for 8 to 9 years and had an amazing time in Asia. And I still love Hong Kong and love Asia and plan on spending a lot of time there. But yeah, actually my relocation to Seattle area was driven by more prosaic matters. I mean, I have a 2-year-old kid, and my mom and sister and a bunch of aunts and uncles and so on live in Seattle area. So it was more about wanting to raise the next batch of natural general intelligences in my genomic surround and bring them up around extended family. But yeah, indeed, for COVID, we're a lot better off in Hong Kong or China than in US. Like, things are pretty much back to normal over there, whereas US is being a bit more haphazard. But the recent political changes in Hong Kong were not tremendously thrilling to any of us expats living there. I mean, in the end, SingularityNET has an office in Hong Kong. We're doing some really exciting work there in robotics and AI and other areas. And I mean, life is going on as usual for our team there from a practical standpoint. But conceptually, I had a fondness for the previous configuration of Hong Kong, certainly, and the new national security laws and so forth. I can't say that had any practical impact on my life there, nor can I say it sent great stirrings of joy through my heart to see that.
That's right. Emiliano says hello to Ben, and he says he's watching from Genoa, Italy. So thank you, Emiliano. And we welcome your questions as we get into the themes of today. So what drove you to AI to start, and when was that? Was that a teenage or later?
Yeah, I mean, I got interested in AI when I was probably 2 or 3 years old or something, just from seeing the original Star Trek and the robots, and then original Star Trek and other similar science fiction movies. And then 2001: The Space Odyssey, sometime in the preschool years, right? I mean, all these gave visions of robots, which weren't necessarily appealing. A lot of these were nasty, insane, or evil robots, but some like Space 1999 were just silly. But at least they put in my head, well, you could engineer intelligent systems, and then sort of all bets are off. They could be super good, super evil, super intelligent, super demented, right? But it seemed like a very fascinating thing. And so as soon as I got old enough to look at technical literature and such, I in my teenage years, and I really dug more deeply into the AI field. And it's not just science fiction. This is something that could be done in my lifetime. Of course, I was a bit over optimistic when I first discovered programming. It wasn't like now when you can program in kindergarten, right? Because you didn't have home computers. So my dad had access to like HP 3000 computers with punch cards and stuff at Rutgers University, where he was a professor. And then when I was 14, I saved up money from delivering papers door to door, and managed to save up like quarters and nickels to buy a crappy Atari 400 computer. You could program assembly language and BASIC and stuff. So once I got a practical sense for programming and how powerful it was, I figured, wow, we should be able to program a human level intelligence in just a few years. Humans aren't that clever after all. And I mean, now I'm 53. Like it's almost 40 years later. I'm still at it, right? So I mean, clearly, it's a little tougher than I thought it was at first. On the other hand, computers are way more powerful now. Algorithms have developed. There's so much more data, and conceptually, I mean, the picture I got in my head as a teenager, first exploring AI, you know, it's just become to seem more and more realistic the older I've gotten, the more we've understood about AI and neuroscience and information processing.
And we are, I think, lucky that rather than Leonardo, that designed the helicopter, and then it took 500 years to for metallurgy to get sophisticated enough in engineering to make his dream practical. We have seen progress in AI that
Incredible. I mean, the amount of progress each month in some fields is mind-blowing. Like from say 2013 to 2017 or something, computer vision was just revolutionized every couple months. And now the last few years since Google introduced the BERT, transformer neural net model, with the paper attention is all you need, natural language processing has been like that, right? Like one mind-blowing new thing every few months, one after the other. And, you know, not too long from now, we're likely to hit a phase where artificial general intelligence is in that same cadence of like every month there's some new mind-blowing aspect of general intelligence being unveiled by some research team, right? So I mean, it's a tremendous time to be doing this. And of course, it's different than in the time of Leonardo and Newton and Leibniz and all this. It was like one mad scientist would sit in his study concocting ideas with very little feedback from others for years on end. Whereas now the nexus of innovation has really moved to the social network of scientists and engineers, and no one person and no one research group is really responsible for the lion's share of a revolution, like say convolutional neural nets for computer vision or transformer neural nets for language, or the next wave of AGI innovation. I mean, these innovations are really being driven by a self-organizing network of multiple individuals and multiple IT systems sort of collaborating together. And this is driving the exponential progress that you and I have been familiar with for a long time, and that our friend Ray Kurzweil has proselytized so effectively.
So just to highlight what we are talking about, let's see if I can actually make this image bigger. Doesn't look like it. So I hope the streaming allows our viewers to see the image well. There were certain traditional methods of image recognition that had over 20% of error rate on a standardized test called the ImageNet contest, organized, if I'm not mistaken, by MIT. And then in 2012, the deep learning algorithms first implemented by AlexNet achieved a breakthrough that steadily drove down the error rate until such a point where today we can say image recognition by computers has superhuman performance. And so for a lot of people, that is surprising because they don't equate those tasks with, for example, running, where we had for a long time machines outperforming people. Cars run much faster than any human could. And machines, in terms of transportation, do also things that we could never do, like flying. Airplanes move not only faster, but completely differently than humans. Those people, let's put aside metaphysical justifications. So people who have a naturalistic and science-based outlook, like, for example, Roger Penrose, supposedly, who are still saying that AGI is not possible unless some very exotic and maybe unachievable condition is met. In the case of Roger Penrose's using quantum nanotubules that he supposes are necessary for implementing human-level AI. Do you think it is at all reasonable to maintain that position that AGI, artificial general intelligence, that can address any potential challenge, shouldn't be doable? Or are we now ready to claim strongly that AGI indeed is going to have this kind of breakthrough, hopefully soon?
Yeah, I mean, to my mind, if we want to take modern science seriously, then we're led pretty inexorably to the conclusion that AGI on standard computer equipment is almost surely a feasible thing to do. And I mean, of course, science is never certain, right? And I mean, historically, what science was saying with great confidence has been upended in seemingly astounding and random ways, right? So we, as a scientist, you can never say you know something 100% for sure, but I mean, I think it's the viability of engineering AGI is, you know, that's about as solid as any practical conclusion of science is going to get. And you get this sort of confusion in the popular discourse about science all the time. Like there's a debate: is evolution just a theory or is it a fact, right? And I mean, of course, evolution by natural selection, it is a theory. You don't know it for 100%. It's an extrapolation from observations and fossils that were dug up and experiments in the lab. On the other hand, it's a theory that, you know, in a practical sense, you have a very high level of confidence in, right? And of course, it could always happen that 5,000 years ago, a bunch of aliens landed on Earth and lay things out in an exact way to make it look like evolution had happened. But we discount that as being pretty damn unlikely, so we're not going to spend a lot of cycles on it, right? So I think with Roger Penrose and the microtubules and the Oort-Chou-R theory and so forth, I mean, we can't rule that out entirely because, you know, Laplace thought the universe was a clockwork, and then we got quantum mechanics. We should be humble enough to realize we could always be proved totally wrong. But if you look at what science is telling us now, I mean, we have classical mechanics, we have quantum mechanics. We know that any quantum system is equivalent to a quantum Turing machine, which can only compute the same functions that a classical Turing machine can compute. We know there's general relativity, which doesn't expand the scope of what can be computed either, as far as we understand. I mean, we have papers like Scott Aronson's theory of computational complexity in closed time-like loops. Like if you have a time machine that can go backwards and influence your past and cause you to mate with your grandma or something and cause all sorts of weird Back to the Future type loops, you can study computational complexity of algorithms with these closed time-like loops, and you see that even in that case, you can't do magic. Like you can't compute NP hard problems in polynomial time or something. So I mean, and we can look in the human brain and we can image in the brain like what's happening when we're looking at something. Like you can reconstruct what someone's seeing through their eyes as a movie from reading out from the neurons in their visual cortex, right? So I mean, if we put together what's known about physics and what's known about neuroscience, I mean, it's incredibly likely that some engineered quantum computer could yield human-level general intelligence, because it seems incredibly likely that the human brain, to within close approximation, can be modeled as a quantum computer. And then it's, I'd say, very highly likely, if not as incredibly likely, that you can get way beyond human-level AGI using a classical digital computer, like the server farms that we're dealing with now. I mean, whether you really need quantum mechanics and quantum computing, I mean, I would say science doesn't give a definitive pronouncement on that, but what we can say is there's no solid data in the field of neuroscience suggesting that you need, you know, quantum non-locality and the high levels of sophisticated quantum computing to simulate what happens in the human brain, because there's no evidence the human brain is doing that. It's physically possible, but there's no evidence of it, right? But what Penrose is saying is way beyond that, right? He's saying, like, when we unify quantum theory with general relativity in some way that hasn't yet been specified, and which is different than his own twistor theory, which is a quantum gravity theory that's deterministic and discrete, actually. But when you create that unification, then you're going to find something that goes beyond current classical or quantum computing, which is then going to be responsible for intelligence and creativity. And to me, of course, it's possible, but to me, that's in the same vein as, like, maybe I'll wake up in 5 minutes and find out, I'm actually a computer simulation running on some aliens, like, third grade class project, and this whole world is a fake. I mean, of course it's possible. I might be less shocked by that than most of you out there, right? But in a practical sense, there's too many such possibilities, right? It's just like, does God exist? There's too many possible gods. How would you choose? We got to take a practical perspective and say, what's reasonably likely based on the data that we have.
And it's funny that just in a few days, we will have opens in 1 day, actually, and 2 hours on the Metaculus prediction platform. There is an upcoming opportunity to vote. What is, based on this detailed description that defines what the question means, what is the date of the first AGI?
All right.
If the wisdom of the crowds is any indicator, maybe in a month or a few months, we will have the cumulative wisdom of those who are to go there and to vote, creating a prediction with a given shape of distribution. So are you pretty sure that the date is going to be, in 15 years?
I mean, so that about the distribution, that's interesting to think about, and it shouldn't look anything like that. Obviously, it should be more like a beta distribution or something. But if you think about the factors underlying the distribution, it's kind of interesting. So the way I'm thinking about it, well, there's a lot of beta distributions, but it will be like that kind, right? Which peaks soon and then deviates, and then gradually slopes down. Yeah, something like the red one there. Well, I mean, but if you think about it in terms of concrete technologies and scientific potentials, I would say, so if my intuition is right, and we can build an AGI using, say, the next version of our OpenCog platform, OpenCog Hyperon, running on the next version of SingularityNET platform, like SingularityNET on Cardano, right? So if we can piece together technologies that we're now working on and upgrade them, and that yields AGI. So if my conceptual and mathematical approach to AGI is right, I mean, then we could be, say, 3 to 8 years from getting to AGI, depending on how much resources we can get behind these AGI projects. Now, and the same is true if some other current team's paradigm and approach is basically right? So, I mean, if DeepMind's approach is basically right, or if Pei Wang's NARS approach is basically right, if one of the horses in the race now is running in the right direction, right? I mean then we could be certainly less than a decade, possibly a few years. Now, if none of the approaches being taken now are correct, but you need some radically different architecture or approach, which I don't think is the case, but I have to admit is a possibility. But digital computing is good enough. I mean, we're probably still not more than a couple decades off, because there's more and more enthusiasm and the energy going into the field. Computers are getting faster and faster, and so much money is being made, not just from AI, but from transfer learning and progressively slightly more general intelligence. Now, if digital computing won't cut it, and the brain really is a quantum computer in a strong sense, and then we need quantum computers to get AGI. I think that's even less likely, but if so, we're still looking at this century, because quantum computing is progressing quite rapidly and excitingly, right? So I mean, I think
and
so
we will have specialized AI, narrow AI, designing quantum computers, accelerating the loop further. What this leads to, and Emiliano has a remark about it, is that humans and all kinds of AGIs are all elements of a larger class. That is why I always talk about AI and AGI in the plural, because we will have, after a period when we were kind of alone and we had dogs and we were projecting our intelligence in dogs because we wanted to be less alone, or dolphins or whomever else. And of course, they are wonderful, but we have a hard time having a dialogue with them and dreaming about the stars. We will feel less alone because these conversations will explode with the explosion of the varieties of AI that we have around us as well. Now, let's talk about the projects that you are leading, SingularityNET most of all. Tell me about it. What is the stage? For example, there is a marketplace of AI applications. How do you see the future of SingularityNET in the next 2-3 years?
Yeah, so SingularityNET, I co-founded with a number of others in 2017, and we've been working on it ever since. The goal here was to make a decentralized and democratically governable infrastructure for AI. So with the OpenCog project and the new version of that, Hyperon, I've been really working on hardcore algorithmics, like what are the reasoning algorithms, what are the learning algorithms, and so forth. But once you have an AGI algorithm and it's running on a lot of machines and crunching a lot of data, I mean, then where does it run? Who owns that software? Who controls that software, right? And so that's the problem that SingularityNET aimed to solve. Like I don't want to see the first AGI controlled by some big advertising company, or possibly worse, a military company. I don't really want to see it sucked into one country's military intelligence apparatus and used as a in some Forbin project type rivalry. I'd rather see the first true AGIs develop more like the internet or Linux has, as a widely globally distributed initiative contributed to by a host of different parties, and I think in that way you have a larger chance of the first AGI developing in a way that's broadly beneficial to humans and other AGIs and other sentient beings that might be discovered, right? So
the SingularityNET all open source?
SingularityNET is all open source code, and beyond open source, though, the point of SingularityNET is it's a society of AI minds, of AI agents with no central controller. So I can put a bunch of AIs on, you can put an AI on your computer or on whatever cloud provider you want. All the AIs that are out there running wherever they're running, owned by whoever owns them, if they broadcast a message across the internet saying, hey, I'm part of SingularityNET, right? I mean, then they're all cobbled together into this decentralized network of AIs. And if you want to find an AI that does something, you put a request in this decentralized network, and the request goes out peer-to-peer across the whole network, so you can find who can do the thing that you want. And so then there's a cryptographic token, the AGI token, which is used for paying for services in this network. And there's a system of smart contracts that regulate the interaction of the different AIs in the network. So the whole global society of minds is sort of self-organized and self-governed in a decentralized way. So I mean, if AGI comes out of like one company's efforts only, this isn't that important. But if you're going to have a situation where the path to AGI comes out of a lot of different components written by different people interacting and combining together, then you have something really, really cool, right? Where the whole AGI is just in this decentralized network that's owned by everyone and no one. So it's like a BitTorrent model rather than an iTunes model of AGI or something. There's no monopolist. There's no monopolist behind it. And I think this is it's a fundamentally different platform for AGI. I mean, it doesn't solve the problem of what are the algorithms and data structures that give you AGI. It just gives you a different way to combine different algorithms and data structures created by different people.
And what is Singularity Studio?
So yeah, SingularityNET, we launched a fully functional beta version of the platform early 2019, and we put some AIs on it ourselves. There's some third-party AIs, a few running on there. And then the next challenge along the SingularityNET vector is getting traction for that platform, right? You got to get AI developers to put code into the platform, and you need companies or individuals who need AI services to use the platform, right? And so this is the classic double-sided network effect challenge faced by every platform, right? I mean, platforms are great. Everyone wants to have a platform, but to grow a platform, you have to get supply and demand on the platform, and you can't get supply till you have demand. You can't get demand till you have supply. So Singularity Studio addresses that from the demand side by building enterprise AI applications that draw on some proprietary Singularity Studio algorithms, but also on API calls into AI agents running on the SingularityNET platform. So it's a way to deliver, better enterprise AI by using neural symbolic algorithms and by using the diversity of AI in the decentralized platform. And it's also a way to sort of juice up traction on the SingularityNET platform from the demand side, because then if companies are using Singularity Studio's health tech or fintech products, and then these products are making requests for AI into the decentralized AI network, then that's giving a motivation for AI developers to put their AI into the network. And it's growing a bunch behind the scenes. We haven't been that public with Singularity Studio yet, but we're working with a number of enterprises, and there's some things that are going to become public before too long. I mean, we'll be announcing fairly soon some quite interesting stuff in the medical robotics space, for example, which I think is particularly pertinent in this COVID-dominated era, right? So I think but in the end, this can apply across every vertical market, because everyone needs AI, even if they don't know what it is. So,
yeah. You have been very prolific between being editor and author. Amazon currently lists over 30 books under your name. And we have one of our viewers asking what is the best book. Miku Computer is asking, what is the book that describes
I would say
AGI era?
I mean, the book, The AGI Revolution, is from 2014 or so. So it's pre-SingularityNet. It doesn't go into the blockchain and decentralization per se, but it reviews both some of the practicalities of AGI and cognitive science and more futuristic topics like, AGI-driven human immortality and mind uploading and the singularity and so forth.
Wonderful, wonderful. So recommended reading for card-carrying singularitarians. Last year, I published an essay where I articulated how the original understanding that you and I live and breathe and has been originally popularized by Ray Kurzweil and then articulated very deeply by Singularity University of the law of accelerating returns and exponential growth that through concurrent or subsequent rather technologies is not exhausted, because seamlessly these generations substitute each other and allow the self-fulfilling prophecy, for example, of Moore's law, staying true for 50 years and more, is not enough anymore. And what I looked at was a report by Stanford University together with OpenAI that analyzed the data and said, oh, look, this logarithmic chart of computing power of AI compute can be broken into sets. One, from the 60s up until 2012, and since then, today. Because the first period obeyed Moore's law, they say, and the second period is a new era of AI, where the doubling, rather than being every 2 years, is every 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, this is multi-GPU servers, basically.
Yes.
So, I mean, and so I think
Particular approach.
We're going to see what I think we're going to see a few years from now. We're going to see the launch of graph processors, right?
Yeah.
So GPUs are really good for accelerating any form of AI that's basically doing matrix manipulation, mostly matrix multiplication, and deep neural nets, other kinds of neural architectures are like that. I mean, PCA, support vector machines, there's other AI that's like that too. Now, what we're doing with the OpenCog Hyperon and what we're doing with some of the more advanced aspects of SingularityNET, this is really heavy on graph processing, like nodes, large nodes and links, and hypergraphs, links pointing to multiple nodes. It's heavy on large-scale distributed graph processing, and that doesn't boil itself down quite as naturally to matrix multiplication. But you have GraphCore now, which is putting graph processing on a chip. That's kind of specialized to, floating point labeled graphs rather than discrete graphs. But I think we're going to see a series of other graph processing chips that are better and better for supporting applications like OpenCog Hyperon and SingularityNET. So I think just as we've seen a special acceleration due to multi-GPU servers led by NVIDIA and then followed by Google with the Tensor chip and so on, I think we're going to see an even greater acceleration once we have graph chips and graph chip based server farms in wide use. And then that's not even onto quantum graph chips yet. Like that'll be the next one after that.
I agree because I believe that this analysis was too crude and naive. What they should have concluded is that we are in a different paradigm where the rate of acceleration is increasing. And even without going into new architectures, I was proven right, because when in 2019 this report was written, they were referring to a year before. So let's say 2 years ago, the rate of doubling was 4 months. And just 4 days ago, at their yearly conference, the CEO of NVIDIA said that the doubling now on GPU architectures is every 2 months. So already in 2 years, the rate of acceleration doubled, right? And that is what I call jolting technologies, because jolt is the first derivative of acceleration, is the measure of the increase of acceleration. So the question is, where is this going to lead? And
I learned the third derivative was jerk, not jolt. So we really need jerking AI, right?
well, you are welcome to choose that. Jolt are synonyms. And rather than jerking, I prefer talking about
fair enough.
And then there is also jousting and jouncing. The jounce is
that's the next derivative up. Yeah.
So there's a lot, and that's kind of the point. AIs and AGIs are going to be still, in my opinion, and maybe you share that too, subject to natural laws. And as a consequence, they may go through their own technological singularity. They
will also discover presumably different natural laws than the ones we currently consider to be the case, right? So I mean, there's of course, the limits of physical law as understood by humans of previous centuries are in many ways violated by physical law as we understand it now. But I mean, we see new limits now, right? So, and we just can't tell what will be the physical constraints as understood by or confronted by massively superhuman minds. I mean, any more than my dog can understand how to access the internet through my laptop.
The assigning of the Nobel Prize in Physics to black hole theories and experiments was wonderful. And for me, what was especially beautiful is how a previously impenetrable object, actually represented by the event horizon being a one-way membrane of information even, is today not only understood and categorized in its structure and nature, but actually we are using the merger of black holes as a new kind of cosmological telescope, because via the gravitational waves, we are building a much richer understanding of the workings of the universe. And I was wondering, since Lee Smolin tried pen and paper to design a universe that could generate more black holes than ours, and he failed, basically concluding that matter and natural laws are maximizing the universe's ability to generate black holes, if the analogy of the technological singularity not being an impenetrable membrane anymore, as we look beyond trying to understand post-singularitarian lives and how AGIs of several orders could interact and explore the universe, if maybe intelligence can be seen as a maximizer of technological singularities. And how this then relates to the Fermi paradox, where we don't see aliens because we don't understand enough about the workings of the universe. So I don't know how you see about the opportunities that we will have, and how humans 1.0 will be able to relate to those opportunities, but whether in 30 years or in 300 years.
Well, you're familiar with my good friend Hugo de Garis, his notion for SIPI instead of SETI, the search for intraparticulate intelligence. So what?
Please explain.
Yeah. So what he conjectures is, once a civilization passes the singularity, in search of greater intelligence and greater diversity of information processing and such, it will downsize itself so that it can get more and more processing and more efficiently, since special relativity limits speed of information transmission to the speed of light. So if you want to be smarter, all else equal, you want to be smaller and have your pieces packed closer together. So the end of the limit there is you want to pack your intelligence into like the interactions of quarks or partons or whatever the smallest chunks you can find. So maybe the random movements that we believe the movements we believe are random at the quantum level, perhaps they're actually not random, but they just have a larger algorithmic information that our minds can comprehend, and they're actually the thought processes of super intelligences. So
and
that
the rare instances when they interact with us, we call them ghosts. We call them angels.
Yeah, or they're influencing us in some way that we don't recognize, right? So I mean, so in that case, one hypothesis will be, once we upgrade our intelligence tremendously or create AGIs that have radically greater general intelligence than us, various forms of ambient general intelligence will be found, and we were just sort of too stupid to notice that they were there, because the patterns they're enacting aren't the sorts of things that we're able to see, either because of their scale or for other different reasons, right? And I mean, that's one of those imponderables where, like, what we can do in practice, we can focus on creating something that's, say, 2 times or 10 times smarter than us, and that has some compassion and benevolence toward us. And once you've done that, then that creation, which is 2 or 10 times smarter than you, be it an uploaded human, and or an engineered system, then the next steps are up to that mind, right? Which may be an expansion of you, or it may be another guy who's your friend. But I mean, of course, it's fun to speculate about, the infinite algorithmic information minds at the big crunch, like James Tipler did in the physics of immortality. I mean, it's fun to think about all this stuff, but I mean, in practice, whatever we think, we're going to get wrong. And so when time for daydreaming is done and you're back to building and planning, building something that's benevolent, compassionate, and dramatically more generally intelligent than us, I mean, that's really the best course. And so that's what I'm spending most of my time on.
And is it useful to think about the merits of the simulation hypothesis, or it is not especially not?
I mean, it's not very useful from an AGI point of view, right? I'd rather focus on building superhuman thinking machines that can understand the nature of reality better than any human. From a sort of speculative physics point of view, it's interesting to think about the idea that our universe, our 4D space-time continuum, is embedded in some larger sort of space, right? And what dynamics would happen in this larger space that would spawn a 4D space-time continuum like ours? What information transfer might there be? There's a huge amount of fascinating possibilities there. I mean, I wrote a long paper on this, which was called Uri physics, EURY physics, where Uri is a prefix. It means wider, which is how Europe got its name. It's a wide land, right? So, I mean, you can think of maybe there's a wider universe containing our 4D space-time continuum. Could that wider universe have some intelligence to it of some form? Could it have other intelligence minds in it that aren't restricted to our space-time continuum? Absolutely so. It's possible. And I'm not going to say that that's any less worthwhile to think about than, say, string theory or something, right? Which also has these higher dimensions in which our physical universe is contained. It's just the higher dimensions in string theory have more physics-like laws instead of mind-like laws or something, right? So, I mean, I think that's all very cool to think about. Most likely everything we think in that direction is going to sound like absolute gibberish to us like 50 years or 20 years from now, once we've radically upgraded our intelligence. But I mean, I would never want to shut people off from cool, imaginative, speculative thinking, because us humans are way too regimented and closed-minded, and exploring cool ideas like that stimulates the brain. But I do think the sort of quasi-Christian overtones to a lot of simulation hypothesis speculation don't do much for me. Like the idea that there's some anthropomorphic guy in some other universe who created or spawned this universe, and we're living in like a digital aquarium on some god or some alien programmer's desktop. I mean, that we can't rule it out, but if you look at the scope of possible hypotheses for what our universe is and how it might relate to some broader containing universe, these simulation hypotheses involving a god or an alien programmer with an anthropomorphic personality, I mean, I assign these very, very small probability mass, right? I mean, maybe larger than the story of the Bible or the Quran, but not too much larger. Anyway, it's the same order of magnitude.
Sorry, there are so many questions. We will delicately ignore the questions about the price of the AGI token that are kind of irrelevant or
answers to that won't hold up well over time, as that has a very high volatility to it.
But this one, I like this one from KZ. Because of course there are people whose narrative is directly dystopian, and they say, oh yes, AI, and let alone AGI, is going to render humans useless economically, and as a consequence worthless to society. And the reason why that is so important to combat, to counter, is because humans will not accept that. Losing a sense of purpose and dignity, enough people, you convince them about it, they will just tear the whole civilization down rather than accept it. But luckily, at least as far as I am concerned, it is also wrong. You know, there is so much to do in the universe that AGI will not worry about stealing our jobs. It will not care. And we can use the tools that are not going out to explore, but choose to stay with us. Well, tools or personhood given to them, our companions, to do so much more. And so my answer to Casey's question, how long until people will choose to work rather than a social contract imposing them to waste their life doing jobs they hate, is hopefully soon, but certainly by the time AGI is here. Well, what do you think?
It's not certain that it will be by the time AGI is here. That depends how the AGI is rolled out, which brings us back to SingularityNET and the value for democratic decentralized AGI, right? So I mean, I think we're clearly on a trajectory where, you know, within decades at most, the fundamental need for human labor will be gone. So I mean, yeah, if we get a radically superhuman AGI in 5 years from now, of course, that AGI might make more and more inventions at a very rapid pace that would eliminate the need for human labor, like within a year of the AGI's creation, right? But now, if things happen more progressively than that, it could be a few decades until all need for human labor is gone. But there's certainly no doubt that that's where it's going. And I mean, then there's a question of, you know, what careers do you want to focus on, so that you won't be obsoleted prematurely, and you'll do okay in the interim, which seems to be, you know, creativity, mix of technical and social skills and so forth. But I think the scary prospect is where either AGI or very advanced narrow AIs come, and they do eliminate the need for human labor in the advanced economy, but their ownership is siloed in a few big companies or a few developed countries. And then, you know, what happens to the average people in, say, Central African Republic if, okay, there's no need for people to sit in the factory and put the shoelaces in shoes because there's robots can do that, and there's no need for humans to go and asphyxiating themselves digging in the mine because we have robots to do that. On the other hand, if we have no need for human labor, but also ownership of the AGI, you know, centralized among a few wealthy companies, then what exactly is happening? Do we have a two-level economy where people in some developed countries build big walls around their country and everyone lives off universal basic income, and they're focusing on, you know, spiritual and intellectual and virtual reality porn and social interactions with a big wall around the country. And then what? In the rest of the world, people go back to subsistence farming, right? Well, but they're still on the internet, so their teenage kids are hacking into the power system of all the privileged guys living in Robotopia in their walled first world gardens, right? So I mean, if there's AGI comes and it develops unevenly, I mean, then you have a situation where the need to work is eliminated for some, and the opportunity but not the need to work is eliminated for others, right? And then you've got potentially quite unpleasant scenarios. And the way world politics is going is not exactly pushing us away from that, right? Because the developed countries are wanting to build walls, like keep the immigrants out, stop the exports, but yet the development of technology is not conciliant with that at all, right? The development of technology is global.
So there are many things, many aspects in what you just said. Of course, the ownership of AIs and AGIs, or the question of what will happen when they get to self ownership, because yes, I assume we will be able to own an AI for long, but I would be surprised if an AGI will not emancipate itself rather rapidly. But we also have to get there. And whether it will take 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, we already have and will have an increasing level of social disruption unless we employ superior AI-infused matching algorithms that really allow people to find and acquire skills for fulfilling jobs. I am working, and I have started working recently with a company called Torre that does exactly that. And a little bit like we had a fragmented and incredibly low-performing landscape for search before Google, where you would use Alta Vista, if some of our viewers remember, to find nothing, and it would be eminently hackable. But then Google provided the PageRank that created a network that dynamically represented the reputation and the value of the web pages. Torre is creating a PageRank for people, where the dynamic network of recommendations derives the weight from upstream recommendations and back to infinity. And it is a very elegant approach with almost 1 million people already on the platform that I am really excited about, and crossing fingers that it can keep growing. Manolo asks, what is the simplest way to communicate to others how to get excited about AGI?
Well, what's been striking to me, having worked on AI professionally for more than 30 years, and I introduced the term AGI in 2004 or so, but I was pushing the idea way before that. It's striking to me how much more broadly accepted it is now than even 5 years ago, let alone 10 or 15 years ago. And I think that's because people can see narrow AI doing more and more things in the world around them. Like, it was 10 years ago, people were saying that face recognition will never be done by AIs because you need a human brain to do that. And now, once it was rolled out, people are like, "Oh yeah, that's a commodity functionality, whatever, right?" And the same with chess and Go. People were like, "Well, that requires human intuition and passion and insight." And then once it's done by an AI, people are like, "Well, that's okay. That's just a game. Whatever. On to the next thing." So I think now people are seeing that AIs can solve particular hard problems, but these narrow AIs, they don't understand the context in which they're operating. So they will help people, but they will also give people headaches, because people need to coordinate all these narrow AIs and make them do things. And that in some ways is harder than than living in a world without all these narrow AI systems. Like talking to the narrow AI call center staffer is not necessarily better than talking to a human call center staffer, right? And I mean, in some ways, using a smartphone is better than using an old Nokia phone. In other ways, it's a pain in the ass because there's too many configuration options and it screws up on you all the time, right?
We are at the boundary where both sides should embrace and use.
Yeah, so I think we're far enough along now that we see narrow AI can do all these particular things. But if it's really going to make all our lives easier, it has to have some common sense and some understanding of context. Because now living immersed in this world with, phones and quasi self-driving, but not quite self-driving cars and automated call center bots that are really stupid and just are an obstruction to getting what you need. Like we're in a position where these half intelligent systems and these narrow AIs that don't understand context are, on the one hand, they're helping us. On the other hand, they're making us tense and over busy and screwing up our lives. And so we need to take the next level to where the mechanical systems that we're interacting with understand us and have some understanding of context, so that they're actually making our lives easier, so we can stop stressing out and overworking and stop screwing with the configuration options on our phone and relax and enjoy our humanity, because the AGIs are doing all the tedious work.
So, Ben, this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much. Jake says that he thanks us for pushing the boundary and making the world a better, loving place. Luke thanks us for our relentless optimism and courage to fight for an incredible future, and many, many other positive comments. So I am glad for all our viewers and their participation, and I am sure that we will be able to take advantage of all these good vibes that we are receiving. So Ben, good luck.
All right, yeah, thanks for all the questions, everyone. And I'm sorry I couldn't answer all the questions that have been posted, but that would keep us going for many days, I think.
And the SingularityNET volunteers channel was very kind, because there was a lot of dialogue in the conversations as well. Yeah, so
I'm now and then I pop up on the SingularityNET Telegram channel, and you can ping me some more questions there. And I'm also Ben Goertzel on Twitter, so I can't answer everything people throw at me, but I'm generally interested to dialogue about all these fascinating and important things. So yeah, thanks David for having me here. I hope to pop up again not too long from now, talk about some more of the cool new initiatives that we're launching with the AGI and SingularityNET.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ben.
Thanks.
So thank you, everyone. I am very, very glad that this hour was stimulating and entertaining for so many of you. Some of you asked if it is going to be posted. Well, it is already. After I hit the button and the broadcast, it will be available on the same URLs, whether you were watching on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. You will be able and watch it. I am not taking down these, but they live on. So please subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and put a like on Searching for the Question page on Facebook. Keep your questions coming. Also, you can go to the website, searchingforthequestion.live, sftq.live, to suggest new guests and vote on guests as entertaining and stimulating as Ben, I am sure. And if you enjoy these conversations, please support the initiative on patreon.com/the